What's up? It's finally time for a tutorial again, this time about color grading in Final Cut Pro, but today it might be a bit different from what you usually see when it comes to color grading in Final Cut Pro, because some time ago I switched back from DaVinci Resolve to Final Cut Pro, and there was one feature in DaVinci Resolve which I did not want to miss, at least not in a certain way, when I added in Final Cut, and that is color management. That's why before I switched back to Final Cut Pro, I of course had a look at how I can kind of create my own solution for color management in Final Cut, and I think I came up with a pretty nice solution that makes color grading quite easy, it looks good, and it's actually quite fast, and this is what I want to share with you today in this video. But before we get into it, let me quickly show you in DaVinci Resolve what color management actually means and why it is so great. So basically, when you're in DaVinci Resolve, you would at first go into Preferences under General, and at least when you're on a Mac, you would turn on this 10-bit precision in viewers if available marker here, and then use Mac display color profiles for viewers, and viewers match QuickTime Player when using Rec 709 Scene. This is like new. Before you always had to use Rec 709A and stuff, but I won't get into that. Now it's a bit too much for this video. After that, you would go into your project settings and set up color management here under color management. I'm doing that here now in the actual project settings because I have some timeline settings there, so it wouldn't actually apply, but I use the same settings that I show you here in my timelines. So under color science, you would select DaVinci YRGB color managed, and there you turn automatic color management off. Would also work, but I prefer to have control here. So then I turn HDR DaVinci White Gamut Intermediate on, even if I color grade SDR, because what color management essentially does is it converts all your log footage or whatever footage you have into a super large color space that is larger than our eyes can see. And then in this color space, you don't actually see that. You just work in this color space whenever you do any color edits in DaVinci Resolve, and it automatically converts that back to Rec 709, HDR PQ, or HDR HLG, or whatever you're color grading in. So this is why I choose color processing mode here, DaVinci White Gamut, because that's this ultra large color space that I want to be working in to avoid degrading the colors. And under output color space, you just select whatever you want. Like usually Rec 709 Scene is what you can use here on Macs. Otherwise, especially on Windows, you would probably select Rec 709 Gamma 2.4. Or if you color grade in HDR PQ, for example, you would select Rec 2020 ST2084 1000 nits. But yeah, for this tutorial here, I would simply use Rec 709 Scene because that's what most of you would be using here. Click Save, and now you see nothing happens. But the cool thing is now that you can quickly tell it what log profile you chose, and then it will automatically convert your colors correctly. So here, for example, we have two clips here that are in C-Log 2, so I would select those clips here in my media pool, and there I could select input color space to Canon log 2, and there you see it already looks good. Can also do the same here on the color page. So here, for example, this is a Sony clip. Here I would do a right click, input color space, Sony S-Gamut 3 Cine S-Log 3, and there you see it also automatically color graded this clip. And now when you do any adjustments here to the colors, like you change your exposure, you apply LUTs or whatever, you're always in this large color space, so you're not degrading your footage. You're kind of working non-destructively. That's pretty awesome about color management. It also makes working across different cameras much easier, because as you just saw, we have Canon footage here, we have Sony footage here, and just by telling DaVinci Resolve what is what, it automatically handles that quite well. So it plays well together, and we're having a good starting point to match all of those, what makes everything quite easy. It also has a grouping feature, so you can, for example, quickly select all those clips here within one scene or so, add them to a group, and then you can apply color grades only on clips from that group here, but not on others. It's quite powerful. And what I also really like about working in a color managed workflow is that, for example, when I change the exposure, it doesn't easily clip the highlights or shadows, but instead it compresses them. You can see that here in the histogram. When I pull the exposure down, then you see that the shadows get compressed, but they don't get below 0. So there's always still some detail left in the shadows, and that ultimately gives you a nicer image without having to put in much work. So that's why I definitely prefer color management when I color grade my footage. But now, of course, in Final Cut Pro, that's not really available. Like you have, for example, when you click on a clip here and you go to that eye icon and extend it here, the option to select a camera LUT, but these are then, for example, LUTs, and if you color grade after a LUT gets applied, you always work with less color information than the original clip has, while in a color managed workflow in DaVinci Resolve, for example, you always work in that large color space, so you always have tons of colors to work with. And of course, it's also a bit limiting here. You can only work with what Final Cut gives you. So I had to come up with my own custom solution to make it work, and for that I use a tool which I already use for many years, which is called Cinematch. This is also the sponsor of today's video, but well, I purchased it already like many years ago, and it was always really helpful. So I would actually also make this video even if they would not sponsor it. Anyway, let me show you how it works. I have essentially two steps in the color grade. The first step is the clip level, and the second step is the adjustment layer level. So what I want to do first here in Final Cut, here's a like recent timeline that I had, is that I would add an adjustment layer by pressing Ctrl A. Now you see it added this adjustment clip here, and I will stretch it to until where it gets dark, let's say, because there I might color grade quite a bit different than during daylight hours. Next, I have some clips here that are already color graded from previous videos, so I would ensure that those clips here and also titles appear above this adjustment layer. Let me turn my sound off here, otherwise it's a bit annoying. So let me drag all of that above the layer. Also titles here, it's really important. You don't want to have titles below that layer. Okay, now you can see it's all well sorted. Only clips that need color grading, that are log footage, are below that adjustment clip. And now I at first start with the adjustment clip part. So I have my presets here. This is what I would recommend you always create presets for all repetitive processes that you have in editing and color grading, because that will save you a lot of time. So generally I color with an HDR PQ. That's why like you see quite a few presets here, because I had to duplicate one for this tutorial to make it an SDR so it's more available for a wide audience, because you're most likely color grading in SDR. However, I will also tell you at the end of the video what settings I changed to make it possible in HDR. So if you want to color grade HDR as well, then you will learn it by the end of this video. Anyway, now I want to prepare the adjustment layer based grade, and this is the part that applies to all of those clips here, because this is essentially how I group certain clips here in the timeline and apply color grades only to that group, to all clips in that group. And so for this adjustment layer, I have a preset here called standard ADJ. I take the SDR version now for reasons I mentioned before. And then you can see now that what that does here is I have Cinematch applied now, a custom LUT, which is like the standard LUT that I use most of the time, and use saturation curves, because sometimes after the LUT gets applied, I still do some changes, but usually I try to do as many changes as possible before the LUT gets applied, the finishing LUT. But now let me show you what I do here in Cinematch. Essentially what I do here in Cinematch is I have the input color space set to Area Alexa Log C, and also the output color space to Area Alexa Log C. The reason why I do that, I will show you in a second. But now what actually Cinematch does here on the adjustment layer level is to convert the footage from log color to Rec 709, or when I usually color grade, Rec 2100 PQ here, because, well, I usually color grade in HDR PQ, but yeah, for the sake of this tutorial, we're sticking to Rec 709. And then I also have the apply Rec 709 transform turned on, because otherwise, as you can see here, it would simply be log footage. And aside from that, I haven't changed anything yet here. You can, of course, do changes here. If, for example, your final look should be a bit warmer, then you could select the temperature slider here or so, whatever you want. But I wouldn't do any changes here that generate the final look now, because we first have to convert our footage to Arri Alexa Log C, because that is what Cinematch here expects. And the reason why I chose that is because I, as mentioned before in the DaVinci Resolve part, want to have a super large color space that I work with. Of course, we're not getting a color space that is as large as we do have in DaVinci Resolve, but Arri Alexa Log C is already pretty good with the gamut that they use, etc. So that's why I use that here. And of course, it's Arri Alexa colors, which is what we all love. And that leads me to the clip level color grade, which is actually the more important ones, because what we're doing now essentially is to just go from clip to clip and quickly changing or adjusting the clips so that all look good. For that, I also have a preset here, which is the standard C-Log2 clip one. Clip because I put it on the clip and not on the adjustment layer. So let me do that now. And here you can directly see the colors changed a bit. It all looks a lot more natural now. And what that does is here, it applies Cinematch and then also some color adjustment and color wheels, which are all empty. Like I didn't do any changes here. I only have those empty effects in there already because I use them quite often, and then I can just quickly click on them, change whatever I want to change, and it looks good. But let me show you here what I do with Cinematch. So here you see this is Canon C-Log 2 footage, actually from the C50, so let me change it to the C50 here. So what it does is it converts the C-Log 2 footage to the Arri Alexa Log C footage. And this is why Cinematch is actually such a nice tool for it. Like as you can see here, they have presets for log profiles and also some other color profiles from all sorts of camera manufacturers. Like they have everything here, and you also see how many cameras there are always available. So also maybe have a look at Sony here. Like you see so many cameras with all sorts of profiles that you have available there. That is what makes Cinematch so powerful. I will also show you in a second what's going on with DJI D-Log M, because that actually makes Cinematch a lot more powerful than other tools. So what it does here is now it converts this log profile to Arri Alexa Log C. So it's essentially very similar to a color space transform in DaVinci Resolve, but it's even a bit more accurate because it actually takes the sensor characteristics of each camera into account, what kind of leads sometimes to some better grades, and sometimes it's like kind of similar to what you would do in DaVinci Resolve with color space transforms. And because I converted the footage now to Arri Alexa Log C from C-Log 2, I essentially work now in that Arri Alexa Log C color page. Like all effects now that come after Cinematch here, like the color adjustments, the color wheels, etc., all work within that color space. And then on that adjustment layer level, we take this color space, the Arri Alexa Log C, and convert it to either Rec 709 or HDR PQ. And that makes it so powerful because now when I'm on a clip level here, I can decide, like I can either use native Cinematch and change the exposure here or so. And as you can see here, it does not crush the shadows exactly as it is in DaVinci Resolve, as I showed you before, and also not the highlights if I really pump it up here. Like here, it never maxes out. And that's awesome. We also have other tools here, like I can change the temperature if I want to have it a bit warmer, for example, the tint as well. I could apply a bit more contrast, probably not really for this shot here, but for other shots, I oftentimes use that. So you can quickly create an S-curve here and have a bit more fine control. Also, you could give it more saturation and stuff, whatever you want. But even if you don't want to use Cinematch here, because you always have to open that window here and put it somewhere, you can as well just use the native color grading tools here in Final Cut Pro. So for example, you could go into the color adjustments here and also just change the brightness or the exposure or whatever. And as you can see, it also doesn't really go below 0. It actually works pretty similar to how it would do in DaVinci Resolve, or also when I natively grade in Cinematch here. And that's because we're working in that Log C color space, and then we are doing the actual transform to Rec 709 or HDR PQ. So it's essentially similar to also like applying the conversion LUT later, but we're in that big color space. So this is essentially the logic behind it. I use Cinematch at the beginning here on the clip level to convert it to Alexa Log C. Then we're having some adjustments on the clip level in between there if I want to use them. If not, I can also just use Cinematch or leave it as it is. And then on the adjustment clip, we're converting this Alexa Log C footage to Rec 709 or Rec 2020 HDR for HDR workflows. And if I want to, I can also apply a custom LUT after that for the final look or so. And if I want to even color grade more, I still have a few saturation curves here. And now the way I would move forward from here is simply that I would at first copy the color grades from the first car clip. Then I would select all the other clips inside the car and copy those grades to them. And now you can directly see that all those clips in the car already look pretty good. Maybe like some where the exposure changed a bit because the sun, you know, changes all the time between the trees. I would maybe raise or lower the exposure a bit, like in this clip here, for example. Now I would go in there and like make it a bit brighter, just so that you can see myself a bit more here, for example. Just change the exposure, done. And then I would simply go through all the other cameras. Like here's, for example, DJI Osmo Nano footage, which already looks kind of color graded here because there's more contrast in the D-Log-M profile. So it looks color graded now, but it's actually not. So the colors here are wrong. That's why I would also like quickly select my clip profile here, but then change it up to DJI. There's nothing available for the Osmo Nano, so here I usually select Action 5 Pro because that generally comes quite close. Then do some custom adjustments here. Like it's not a perfect match because it's not exactly the same camera that I select here, and D-Log-M always varies a bit from camera to camera. It's not like a properly defined log profile. And then I would also copy that over, but there of course I would have to do more adjustments now because this is not like a unified profile. So you see now while I'm going through here, everything I really do is that I apply the preset to all those clips one after the other, and then I do some quick adjustments here, and usually that's already enough. And that's why this is so beautiful. The moment you have this workflow established, all you really have to do is to just put your presets in there or copy and paste your settings from other clips, do some adjustments quickly, and you had a pretty good point actually. Of course, I sped the video up here about 2 times to not bore you too much by showing you how I color grade every single clip here, but I think you get the message here from looking at what I'm doing here in my timeline. All of that is actually quite quick. Like I could edit a full video like that one here in probably about 30 minutes, and the grades turn out really good. So this is how I color manage in Final Cut Pro. Yes, you do need Cinematch for it, but honestly, I actually purchased that tool, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 years ago. And there have been so many occasions throughout the years where I actually used it, especially because it can convert D-Log-M also to HDR. This is actually like the only tool I know to convert D-Log-M colors to HDR, at least for certain D-Log-M capable cameras and drones. And that also leads me to the next part of this video, which is where I want to show you how I use that for HDR color management, because there's actually not much that you have to change here. Like at first, in your project and like also library settings in Final Cut, you have to go to the settings there and modify here, for example, on the project, and set that to wide gamut HDR and then PQ or HLG, depending on what you want to grade. I generally prefer a PQ because it's more accurate. Made another tutorial about that. And then in the adjustment layer, like in a Cinematch settings that you use to do the conversion from log to the finally good looking colors like Rec 709 before, you would change the project color space here under HDR color management to Rec 2100 PQ. And then as you can see, it automatically adjusts the colors. It of course looks bad now on my screen because that's not an HDR capable monitor here. I think I forgot to show you, like you would also have to set your library to HDR before. So you just click on the library, modify, and you set it to wide gamut HDR here before. And then all of that works. Like then you can use the exact same workflow here to color grade HDR, and it even works with D-Log-M. So it's actually a really nice workflow to use even for HDR color grading, and in some regards even better than DaVinci Resolve because you get D-Log-M here. But also, let me show you that quickly. If you have titles, for example, here in HDR, and then I have a preset here, which I call 203 nits limit, and I always use that on titles there. And there I simply use this HDR tools effect from Final Cut Pro, the native one, set it to PQ output tone map, and there I set it to peak brightness 203, and it automatically adjusts titles and graphics that would otherwise be too bright to the proper HDR mapping, which is 203 nits. And it looks good. Like in DaVinci Resolve, I always had to use a curves tool, etc., to get it to work. Like that's really bad there. So just to give you one example. So this is how it works. If you have any questions about color grading this way in Final Cut Pro, leave them in the comments below and I will answer them ASAP. And also, if you're curious about how I color grade HDR or how to do it properly, check out this video and this one here in the corner. Like I made an update as well. There you will learn more. And I will also update you with an HDR color grading tutorial for Final Cut Pro very soon, because the one here is for DaVinci Resolve. So subscribe for that. Also, don't forget to download Cinematch. The link is in the description below, and I see you in upcoming tutorials.